Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Creatively Free. I'm your host, arielgrace, and I'm delighted today to have a special guest, Corri Lynne, who is a author and illustrator of children's books and has a really special background that she's going to share with you a little bit today. Welcome.
Hi. Hi. Thanks for having me, Ariel. I'm just really excited to be here and be a part of this. I love your podcast,
Oh,
and this is very exciting for me.
amazing. Yeah, so let's just start by giving folks a little bit of your background.
Yeah. So, growing up, I always had this innate urge to create in any form. Like I loved to sing, I loved to draw. I came from a family of creators, like sewing and crocheting and quilting, and my grandfather was a musician, so that was just always a part of me. And the form that I really connected with the most was drawing and painting, and so that led me to pursue psychology and art in college. I had this idea that I wanted to maybe be like an art therapist. But as my college career progressed, I started to really struggle in my art classes. I was started comparing my work to everybody else's work, and I felt like mine wasn't good enough. Um, and I felt like that reflected on me. I felt like I wasn't good enough. And it got to the point that every time I would try to even put anything on the paper, I was so filled with rage and shame and self-loathing that I couldn't even get more than a couple lines on the page, and I would literally be in tears. Um, and then on top of that, I was also struggling with an addiction and an eating disorder that was progressing. And it stemmed from childhood trauma and undiagnosed PTSD. And I, unbeknownst to me, I was self-medicating. And so this kind of progressed and progressed until I was to the point that I really wasn't even functioning. And that's when my family stepped in and recognized there's something going on here. And I was fortunate enough to have amazing resources. My brother is actually a psychologist, and he worked in drug and alcohol for years. And he was able to really line up a treatment plan for me of okay, this is what you're going to do, XYZ. And really gave me the resources, and he had the knowledge that I needed to set me on my path of healing. And so I ended up dropping out of college. I chose to go into an inpatient treatment. So I did a 6-month treatment that was centered around eating disorders and drug addiction. And so I started my healing journey, and I'm still on that journey today. Still in therapy. I love therapy. I'm such a advocate for it. And I also recognize that I'm so fortunate because many people don't have the resources to go to therapy. And so I do recognize that I am fortunate to have had those resources in my life. But once I got to the point in my recovery that I was ready to start looking at, okay, where do I want to go from here? What do I want to do for a career? What does that look like for me? And at this point, I still hadn't regained my ability to draw. It's every time I tried to draw or be artistic in that way, there was just this wall. So I decided to go into cosmetology. So I wanted to do hairstyling, hair design, and coloring. And I thought that would be enough for me to express my creativity in that way in my career, that I would be satisfied with that. And for a long time, I was. And I've had a thriving career behind the chair for 13 years. It's been amazing, but I still felt like there was pieces of me that were missing. And I've still been in therapy this entire time. And as the years go on, the therapy progresses. It really is like that metaphor of peeling back the layers of the onion. And once I think okay, I've worked through this, I've made this progress, it opens up to this other layer of, oh my God, there's way more. Yeah. Way more underneath there. But in one of our therapy sessions, my therapist she gave me an assignment to draw my shame. And I laughed at her and I said, that's not going to work. I'll try, but like, I'm not an artist anymore. I cannot do that. I've lost that part of me. It's gone. I've come to terms with it, like whatever. But I went home that night and I got my art supplies out of the attic because I still had them tucked away. And I got my sketchbook, and then the medium that I chose was pastels. And so I put the pastels to the paper, and like it just started flowing. And all of the shame and self-loathing and anxiety and anger transferred from me to the page. And it was like a messy, scrawly, whatever.
Yeah.
But it like opened up that dam. It broke that open in me, and I've just been like a wild woman, like creating ever since. Like all those years of that repressed creativity being like stuck and shoved so far down in me has been able to express itself, and it's just been the most amazing experience.
Wow. There's so many threads that I want to pull on here. I think I shared with you, I did a course that kind of had the same kind of vibe in terms of allowing. I think we have this programming from pretty young age, and also women do a lot, is that art needs to be beautiful. Like that was
Yes.
definitely a block, I think, for me in terms of creating art. And I kind of heard that in your story around you were creating and you were looking around and seeing things that were air quotes more beautiful or more whatever than
Yeah.
what was coming, and as a extremely visual person, I can relate as well to, like, in your head it shows up a certain way,
Yes.
and then it's still a craft and you're just working so hard for it to match something that you envision, and the
Yeah.
angst that can come up for that. And so, yeah, my course was a similar sort of unfolding of allowing yourself to do things like that, right? Like make the ugliest thing that you
Yes.
can make.
Yes. And I think it touches on too, like I know there's so many people that struggle with this, but struggling with perfectionism in myself. And then like I think maybe that rage and that anger came from like that was almost like a visual representation on the page of my imperfection within myself. And instead of at the time, like now I look at the imperfections as, it's that's what makes us all unique and that's what makes us all beautiful. And an imperfection isn't a negative thing. But at the time, it was like the worst thing that I could see. So, yeah, I
Right.
can relate to that.
And also the training we have from capitalism of, like, you create beautiful art so that you can do something with it, give it to someone, sell it. Like, what is this innate need to create that we don't necessarily do anything with, right?
Yes, yes. Like as children, when we just create to create and it's so freeing and we just put whatever's on the page that we want to and enjoy the process of creating and that like I think it's amazing how children can look at something and then create this like stylized version of it on a page. And it actually is such an art in and of itself. Like when I started down my journey with the children's books, and I decided I needed to do some education, and I went to an online illustration school. It took about a year to prepare myself and do some education. And the type of art that I had always created was more traditional, like you're realistic. You're like looking at this and then you're putting this on the page. Um, and so I had to really learn how to like look at something and convey that without making it look exactly how it looks. Like, how do I take that and stylize it and make it my own? But to children, that just comes so naturally, which is like amazing. So opening that up again of like, yeah, this doesn't have to be perfect. This can be a blob. This can be this is anything that I want it to be to represent whatever I want it to represent, and just being free with that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I have found, I'd love to hear how it feels to you, uh, that those certain markers in our childhood when we say no to our art, or we say we're not doing that anymore. Then later when we start to like barely inch in, kind of like maybe I'm ready or whatever. For me, that perfectionist voice comes through really critical, you know,
Yeah.
you're an imposter, like, you know, this is not, you're not, all of those voices come in. And
Yeah.
I've done meditation and mindfulness enough that I just recognize them.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually turn towards that. I'm like, oh, do something.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing to keep exploring.
Yeah. I really struggle with the same. And I train.
That's okay.
But I, I look at other children's book authors and illustrators, and I take, inspiration. Most of the time I'm taking inspiration that, but then sometimes I get into that headspace that I'm like I'm just never going to be as good as they are, and my style is just nowhere near what any of these styles are, and no one's ever going to take me seriously, or my art. Like I struggle with the imposter syndrome. And yeah, it does take, and sometimes I'll sit in that for a while, and then I'll get back into that headspace of like, you know, I people might look at my style and love my style the way that I look at other people's styles and love their styles. And just because my style is different from them, that's what makes it unique. I want my style to be different than all these other styles. And then sometimes I'll get caught up, and I just want, I know my style is progressing and I know it's going somewhere, and I just want it to be there already. And then I have to sit back and breathe and just say, it's always going to be progressing. This is going to be a journey that I'm going to be on for the rest of my life. And this is where it's at now. And in 10 years from now, it's going to be somewhere else. And in 10 years from there, that's going to be somewhere else. So it's, appreciating it for now for what it is, and that letting it kind of just flow and come through me. And then I think, it'll be like a really cool ride to, look back like 10 years from now, to look back and see those progressions year to year in my art and the way it expresses itself. And also it's really cool to see like some of my favorite illustrators, if you look at the progression of their styles over the years, it goes from being more clean and more structured and more what some people would look at and say like that might be better art. But then they progress to this more loose, like unstructured, kind of messy style that I gravitate to more. And that's kind of been my goal, is like I'm learning how to go from this tight, kind of restricted, like rule-based creating to this more loose, like flowy, it can be what it is type of art. So it's really cool to like see others progression in that, and that, you would, because some people would think it would be the opposite, like you're going from like the scribbles to the poised, but like it is some people's progression and goal to go the opposite way, which is really,
It sounds like that involves a layer of self-trust. It's like you have a certain level of foundation that you have to set essentially in like
yes,
the craft, and
yes,
a certain level of mastery that you start out in a particular field, right? And
yes,
then
yeah,
as you become more of a master, you become more experimental, essentially.
yes, yes. I think that's a really good way to put that. Yeah. You become more experimental, you become more secure in yourself, um, to be able to kind of let go of expectations of others, and you know kind of create what you really want to create.
Mhm.
And maybe not what is expected, and probably some unlearning too. Like you learn those you build up all those skills, and it's the perspective and the lighting and the shading and the color theory and all of those things. And so in the beginning it's like that you're practicing all those things and you're doing all the things and you want to do all those things perfectly to kind of prove that you have these skills. and And then it's like like a slow unlearning of those things of like, okay, like now what can I do and what can I let go of these rules to see like what really wants to come out of me.
Mm. Yeah. So tell me more about this transition, because I know a lot of people, including myself, I'm often transitioning into slightly pivots in career and entrepreneurship. And
Yeah.
tell me more about that transition experience.
Yeah. So I'm still in like the beginning stages of the pivot. I still work at a salon 3 days a week. Um, and because when I first had the idea of like, okay, I think this is what I want to do, and I wasn't sure exactly where I wanted to go with it. I just knew I wanted to write and illustrate a children's book. So I went through like the education stage, um, and then and then I started with the writing, and I found an editor that I love. She specializes in children's books. And then once I got to the point where I was like actually working on the book and working on the illustrations, I realized pretty quickly that working full time at a salon and pursuing this, I didn't have much time left over for any type of like self-care or family time with friends. And my work life balance wasn't great. And so I knew if this was something that I seriously, and I kind of at this point had the idea of like, I think I want to actually like maybe take this seriously as a potential like career shift. And so I knew I needed to reduce my hours at the salon. And it was super scary to think about, like losing some of my income. Like I knew I would have some still. But reducing your income is always very fearful. But I had to just trust in the process and the universe that like I felt like this was the right direction for me. So I went down to 3 days at the salon. So I work at the salon Monday through Wednesday. Um, and some of those are longer days, like 10 to 12 hours. And I'm fortunate enough too to be able to like arrange my schedule like that to where I'm on like the higher end of part-time. Um, and then that gives me Thursday through Sunday to set working hours to pursue. It was working on the book, and then once the book was finished, it's now like figuring out this terrain of marketing and putting it out into the world and school visits, while I'm also working on more manuscripts and working on my online portfolio and like all the things. um and so, but once I was afraid of what's my husband gonna think, what's my family gonna think, are they gonna think I'm like crazy? But once I started taking it seriously and I started like acting as if, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna like that phrase, like fake it till you make it. And I just got into that mindset of like, I am an artist, I'm an author, I'm I'm this is my career and I'm doing it. And I set the hours for myself, and people would be like, oh, do you want to go do this? You're not working today. I'm like, actually, I am working today. I'm working at home. This is what I'm working on. And then my family and my friends started taking it seriously, and they actually really got behind me. Really, it's been really incredible and healing in itself to like just see the such positive support and response from people, and they kind of followed me along on my journey. Would always talk to everybody about it. It was really important to me to not keep it a secret.
Mhm.
I wanted to, even though it's scary telling people you're doing this new thing, and then what if it doesn't work out, and are they going to think that I'm a failure? Are they going to laugh at me and think it's stupid? But I really wanted to fight all of those thoughts and just be really open with everybody about what I was doing. And it was amazing. Everyone was so excited and encouraged and supportive. And so yeah, so that's been the start of my transition. And then I don't know how long I'll be in this transition period. Like my long-term goal is I would love to get an agent, representation from an agent, and get some books traditionally published. Um, and I don't know if that will happen or not. That's what I'm working towards. But in the meantime, it's very important to me to not put the pressure of financials on my art. Like
Mm.
I don't want to feel pressured to take illustration work that I don't feel passionate about, or that I feel isn't aligned with the projection that I feel that I need to go towards. So I'm really satisfied and comfortable with doing both for now.
Yeah.
because it gives me the freedom to not have to put that burden. And I actually heard that from Elizabeth Gilbert in her book, Big Magic. I don't know if you've read that or not, but it's amazing. And she talks about that, of like kind of not putting that financial burden onto your art, that
Yeah.
it has to be your put food on the table for you and do all these things for you. Um, so for now, that's just where I'm going to sit and where I'm kind of going to live. And then I'm just going to see what happens and where it takes me.
There's so many interesting things that you share that I think are really inspirational and things that I've practiced as well. So one, putting the label on yourself when you're ready to declare it. I started doing that as a young person, and the older I got, it was harder for some reason.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so important is to start saying it and declaring it and telling others, and then like you said, reinforcing your schedule, really creating the space on your calendar. It's not a
Yes.
hobby anymore. It is something that I'm dedicating some amount of my time to, and going to pivot my career into being a well-paid artist.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I love that. Um, and doing it until the world responds properly, because they may not initially.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me too, it's like, keeping my expectations open, that, right now in my mind, my goal is to get an agent and get traditionally published, but the universe might have different plans for me. And so I am open to like, I'm totally open to continue to self-publishing if that's like how I need to get my art out into the world. I'm like totally open to continue to go that route. Or also like who knows what form my creativity might go or
Right.
might be led. And so I am, even though that's my trajectory, that's my goal, what I'm working towards, I'm also open, and I don't have my heart completely set to any one expectation as well.
Yeah. What does the feedback loop feel like for you in terms of your art, like knowing that you're creating that body of work for you?
Yeah,
And then what is it like in terms of how people are responding?
it's really incredible. It's been really healing, especially with, so I'm going into schools and I'm reading to the children and I get to see their response to my work, which is like so wonderful. And like so my book Peanuts Bedtime Adventures, it has it's a bedtime story, and it introduces some mindfulness and meditation, some breathing techniques. I collaborated, my brother, the one who's a psychologist, we collaborated together on the book, because these are all things like growing up as a child, I desperately needed techniques like this. And I, my nervous system, when we have trauma as children, our nervous system develops differently. And so we typically are supposed to be able to come in and out of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system fairly easily, which is like the rest and digest versus the fight, flight, freeze. And a lot of people who experience trauma as children get stuck in that fight, flight, freeze state, um, which can lead to like chronic pain, anxiety, panic attacks, like a lot of things. And so there's these very simple techniques to be able to get back into that parasympathetic rest and digest um, system. So we can do like diaphragmatic breathing into our diaphragm, self-soothing touch, like placing our hand here on our chest or like giving ourselves a hug will stimulate the vagus nerve and kick us back into that rest and digest. Um, and like body scan meditations. And so that's been a big part of my therapy throughout the years. And I really wanted to like introduce those techniques in a children's book, and I did it in like a very fun story format. It involves like an ocean meditation with some mermaids, and there's a song involved. Like it's cute.
Which is your
Um,
actually the
huh?
song.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. But yeah, so it's been amazing to see. And when I do when I read to the kids at the school, like as I'm reading the part where Peanut puts her hand on her belly and her hand on her chest. They do that. And like I can see them following along. And then afterwards we do a little breathing exercise and we explore how breath feels in our body and how that can change how we feel. And um so it just feels really amazing to feel like I may be making a difference. You know, maybe these things are like, even if it's just a small thing, like something that's going to help someone throughout their life to have, you know, some of these tools. And then even in my writing, like the manuscript that I'm finishing up with my editor right now, Evelyn and the Magical Button. So it has been incredibly, like, deeply healing for me to work on this manuscript, because it I took aspects of myself, um and I kind of was at first like writing my story in Evelyn's story. And the way that I thought about the idea was, in my therapy work, we do a lot of like inner child work and inner child healing. And she'll have me go back as my adult self and like comfort and, you know, like give the parenting and the comfort that and the protection that I needed that I wasn't getting, and I give that to my child self. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, you know, how cool would it be to have to write a story about, you know, a child that is able to go to the future and meet their future self, and in that find hope for a life that is maybe better than what they're experiencing right now. And you know, in school, because of the trauma that I was experiencing, and we also grew up in like a lower social economic background, and so I didn't have nice clothes, and I was a really weird kid. I was just a really strange kid. I was awkward. And so I got like picked on a lot at school. That I had, you know, some tough experiences at school because of that. And so I was able to write about that through Evelyn, and then like write out some different, like some kind of like change those outcomes into like a better outcome. And Evelyn had a better outcome than maybe I had at that time. And that has just been really cool to be able to connect these different pieces of myself, like through my storytelling and my characters.
Yeah, it really does feel like kind of a transcendent journey for you. Very meaningful,
Yeah.
and being able to
Yeah.
give that back to kids, which is when you were experiencing, that's the age in which you were experiencing some of this. So it's really cool.
Yes. Even going into the schools, um, and being in a school setting at that time that was like so traumatic for me, and I was like struggling in school so much. And so like my previous experience with school was like this level of like fear and anxiety. And you know, I was sick a lot as a child because I was so anxious and didn't want to go to school. And so to be able to go it back into a school like around those age ranges and have a totally different experience of it and feel so like loved and accepted, and able to be like open and share who I am, and like that also has been very cathartic and like just a really really cool experience for me.
That's amazing. And what do the kids say? How do they respond?
So I get like, it's so cool. So we do, they love the book for one. And when I first put the book out into the world, Penis Time Adventures, I was like, because it's not perfect, right? And I was seeing all these, I'm like, oh, I don't like the cover. Like, oh, I wonder, like maybe this could have been written better, and I could have illustrated this page so much better. But like the more and more it's been out in the world, and like the better and better, like the more amazing responses I get from people, and then seeing the kids love it, like they are just like silent, like staring, like like while I'm reading, and I do the voices and like, you know, make it fun. And then afterwards we do like a question and answer, and depending on the age range, like sometimes the questions are more like statements, but it's still cool to see how they're relating. They're like, we loved the mermaids, we loved Peanut, and then they'll start maybe talking about, you know, like experience, like how they sleep, and oh, I still sleep with my mom, and I get scared and whatever, and it opens up that kind of dialogue to like talk about that. So, and I was really surprised too of how intuitive they are as far as their breath and understanding and feeling like that they like understanding that connection. Like we do like a little, almost like a silly to calm exercise, and I'll have them breathe. I'm like, now we're gonna pant like a dog, and we'll breathe up here like that, and then I'm like, and then we feel our bodies, and we feel that it feels really excited and kind of tense, and then we stop and we breathe deep into our diaphragm, and we do like a little box breathing, and then I'm like, okay, now do you feel how your body feels calm? And um they're just very receptive to that and very in tune with that, and just pick up on it like really easily.
Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah. I've been noticing both my daughters have opportunities for yoga in school, and it's so like enlightening and helpful to me to be like, okay, I have hope. Things are happening for these younger generations.
Right? Yes. Thank goodness. It's needed, that's for sure. Like that would have been very nice to have. So,
Really.
yeah.
Well, what's next? What are you're working on this release of the button book?
So as of now, I haven't I've written the manuscript. It's in the final editing stages with my editor. And I'm working on my online portfolio. And then I want to take this next year, and I want to work on a couple more manuscripts, continue working on my portfolio, and then continue with, um, exploring, because this, marketing for me is, it's a trial and error thing. So I'm like, okay, let's see what works. Let's build some relationships and just, have fun with this. And so, when I feel like I have, because they say when, like, I've done some research on querying agents, and they say, they really want to see that you have more than one manuscript. They want to see that you're someone who, as far as for a literary agent, that is, they want to see that you have more than one idea. And so, I want to get, at least 3 solid manuscripts, like written and professionally edited and ready to pitch, um, and like make sure that my portfolio is really solid. And then at that point, I'll start sending out some query letters to agents. I'm a member of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. There, have you heard of them?
Yeah.
They're amazing. A great organization, and they do biannual conferences. And there's agents and editors and people from the industry and other writers and artists. And so, I'll probably start to attend some of the conferences and start kind of networking in that way. And then, if I feel like I don't get an agent and in the time frame, and I'm feeling that itch to like really get into my creating again, then I think at that point I would start developing one of the manuscripts into another book and go ahead and self-publish, while I'm also kind of, trying to get an agent and still work towards that goal. So that's the trajectory of my perceived plans. You never know what life has in store, but
Yeah.
that's my plan for now.
Yeah. I imagine your community will be sort of this overlap of mindfulness and children's authors, essentially, because that is kind of a specific niche that's really
Yeah.
special. Well, thank you so much for this beautiful chat. And everyone go check out and purchase Corri's amazing book for your children.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ariel, for having me on. This was just a really fun, chill. I was a little bit nervous, but you made me just feel super comfortable and relaxed. And this was a really good conversation.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.